Has Ryan Day put together the kind of staff that can go back-to-back and win the national championship, especially given what they have lost to the NFL? What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. If this is your first time watching the #1 college football show, welcome. Thank you for joining us here. We talk college football 365 days a year, 24/7 around here, and join the nearly 131,000 people that have subscribed to the channel. And if you subscribe, answer the question below, man. Do you think Ohio State can run it back to back? Got one of those little subscriber bugs next to your username, much more likely to get an in-depth response from me. That's usually how these things work. You know, incentives and whatnot. Now, I think it is interesting to talk about whether or not Ryan Day and Ohio State can run it back to back, if they can get this done, be the first program to do this since Georgia has done it and was looking to three-peat before the wheels fell off that wagon, as Michigan just decided, hey, look, we're going to get this done. But before them, Alabama decided we're going to get this done. Let's start with this. Ohio State's got 15 players that have been invited to the NFL Scouting Combine. Not too shabby. Behind them, though, Texas and Georgia each got 14. Ohio State by far has the most invitees, and we'll see if all 15 of those guys end up getting drafted. It's not out of the realm of possibility. Led by Cody Simon, Donovan Jackson, Josh Simmons, Megabuka. We keep going here, right? But as they've lost all this talent to the NFL, and not nearly as much to the transfer portal as you might think, my goodness, Ryan Day has also had to basically rebuild the offensive staff and give control of the defense to an unknown, at least to Buckeyes. On the offensive side, Brian Hartline has been elevated from wide receivers coach to offensive coordinator, still going to have a heavy hand in receivers. Billy Fessler, quarterbacks coach from offensive analyst, a guy that came over with Chip Kelly and was apparently instrumental in helping build this offense that could win a national championship, and is given the task of growing up Julian Sayin, among others, to be the next starting quarterback at Ohio State. Then you've got Keenan Bailey, tight ends coach, who brought in Max Clare from Purdue, who might be the best tight end in the Big Ten this year, and he's now co-offensive coordinator. And then you had to replace your, offensive line coach, Justin Fry, who took the same job at the Arizona Cardinals, with Tyler Bowen, which I think is a sneaky, really great hire by Ryan Day. It's a former coordinator at both Penn State and Virginia Tech, and it's a former tight ends coach for Urban Meyer and the Jacksonville Jaguars, that year being what it was. But it's a guy that has outstanding recruiting chops. And right now, guys like Maxwell Riley are in his purview. Guys that he's going to try to flip and turn to bring back to Ohio State, or to bring into Ohio State, to try to give them the backbone of another great offensive line that is capable of sustaining the kind of injuries that they did last year and still winning the national championship. Like, that low-key was the best coaching job, I believe, of anybody on that staff last year. What Justin Fry was able to do with Donovan Jackson, sliding him out when Seth McLaughlin goes down. You got basically playing 4 guards on your offensive line, 3 to 1 side, and you're able to win a national championship with those guys. To say nothing of losing Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins, and what Carlos Loughlin is going to have to get going with C.J. Donaldson, James Peoples, and the like, right? Then there is replacing your offensive coordinator, Chip Kelly, who is a mentor, but also a guy that knows what the NFL is looking for. And, a whole lot of folks that wanted to coach in the NFL haven't. And Ryan Day, having been a quarterback's coach in the NFL, has fascination with it. So I didn't find it that out of the ordinary for Day to tap Matt Patricia to be his defensive coordinator. What I did find out of the ordinary was that he really was interested almost exclusively in NFL experience at a high level. So Joe Cullen was a name that was being talked about and even brought to me as a guy that potentially could be headed to Ohio State to be defensive coordinator. He's the defensive line coach at Kansas City. He's probably going to stay there. And by the way, it ain't necessarily a bad thing to be coaching George Karlaftis and Chris Jones on a defensive line that made the Super Bowl and made the Super Bowl for a 3rd consecutive year in a row. I mean, that's a good gig if you can get it. Now, he settles on Matt Patricia, who is an unknown, who's got 3 Super Bowl rings, who's been a head coach, who's outstanding defense coordinator, Bill Belichick, and as people like to tell me all the time, is a rocket scientist, to which I'm going, what that got to do with playing football? It's not to dissuade you from the idea that he is a smart man. He's an extremely intelligent man. There's lots of intelligent men playing football and coaching football. But one does not necessarily mean you're going to have success, right? Think about his stint with the Detroit Lions. They need to know at Detroit that they needed to get their Matt Patricia experience so they could have their Dan Campbell experience. Now you're bringing that guy to coach at the highest level of college football, and we'll see how it works out. You've also elevated Matt Geary, who was leader in the clubhouse, to be the defensive play caller, to passing game coordinator, basically for what he was able to do with the safeties. Like, I talk a lot about what Caleb Downs was able to do because he's a unanimous All-American, but also Latham Ransom was no slouch on the back end of that defense. Really fun to watch. Tim Walton is back, right? What he was able to do with those tailbacks, Jermaine Matthews being one of those guys that stepped up big, cornerbacks. And then you're going to have Larry Johnson Sr. continue to coach your defensive line. You're going to grow those guys up in a hurry. You're going to have to get smart on that side of the ball really quickly. And perhaps that's one of the reasons that Ryan Day decided he wanted to go get a guy with that NFL experience. But it's really starting to get under our skin, I think, that Ryan Day had a fascination with those New England Patriots teams and their coordinators that won Super Bowls. He hired Bill O'Brien before Bill O'Brien decided to take the head coach Boston College job and ends up going with his mentor and Chip Kelly. Turns out to be, for most, a better idea, and it led to a national championship. Then even the defensive side of the ball, bringing in Matt Patricia. And perhaps it is as simple as being an offensive play caller for so long and knowing that side of the ball the way Ryan Day does. He looks at the defense and says, what's going to give me problems, what's going to give me fits? Probably what led him to getting Jim Knowles from Oklahoma State to come up to coach defense at Ohio State and led them to a national championship. Big shoes to fill for Matt Patricia, I think, because as much as Buckeye fans do not want to admit it now, Jim Knowles is the best defensive coordinator in the country last year. There's no question. Number one scoring defense, number one total yards allowed, number one in red zone scoring touchdown defense, and really stout with their back against the wall last year. It was just hard to score points on that team. It was hard to move the football on that team because they kept everything in front of them and they prevented you from making explosives. And when they decided to blitz, they got home. Really great with that. It's bringing all that over to Penn State. And that's where I think the rub is. The staff, it's good enough. It's good enough to get you back-to-back national championships. It is. You've got enough experience. You've got enough savvy. And you got new dudes that know what it means to be on the losing end of an important game and on the winning end of an important game. They also still got Jeremiah Smith, and you don't. JJ is still that dude. Like, if Julian Sand throws 50-50 balls to Jeremiah Smith more often than not, they're probably going to win more football games than they lose. And Jeremiah Smith ended up being the reason they housed Oregon and the reason that they sealed the victory against Notre Dame. There's no question about that. And then you got your home run hitters across the rest of the board. Carnell Tate able to carry the load if you want to bracket and double Jeremiah Smith. Same thing was true of Brandon Ennis to a degree. I think we're going to find out just how deep that running back room is really quickly. Carlos Lachlan might have a job in trying to figure out who his bell cow is going to be, but in any other year, we might be talking about James Peoples the way that we might have been talking about Jeremiah Smith. Jeremiah Smith exceeded the expectation, which was already enormous. Like, people were talking about that dude in ways that they don't talk about players ever that young. I think now, given that how young that room is and given that Carlos Lachlan gets to put his prints all over it, we're going to get to see just how good they are, not just at running the football, but in pass protection, because they're going to have to be. Julian Sand is going to need a little bit of help. I'm saying Julian Sand because right now that's the presumptive starter. Not to say that he can't get beat out by August, but it's possible because you're looking at a 4 straight starting quarterback at Ohio State in 4 years, right? C.J. Stroud, Kyle McCord, Will Howard, now we think Julian Sand. So there's a lot to unpack there. But I did want to talk about that just for a little bit and acknowledge that, yeah, for the most part, all the moving and shaking is done at Ohio State. Now it is, can you rebuild this thing knowing that their season's going to be long and you're going to have to face Texas to start, and you need to get off to a good start to retain that top spot? Because I think that Ohio State-Texas game at the start of the year is going to be for the number one ranking come week 1. It would not surprise me to find out the Texas number one team in the AP preseason poll, even though they lost a bunch too. It's more about what you expect from March Manning, what you expect from Steve Sarkisian, what the voters think. But we got a long ways till we get to August. But right now, I'm already salivating over this season. It's going to be a lot of fun.